Hello and welcome back to the Fearlessly Different podcast, the podcast focused on encouraging a next generation of courageous students to pursue a different education. I'm your host, Nadine Loffer, and welcome to episode number 51, and the first episode we've released in a very long time. Thank you all for being here. I know it has been quite a while since I released an episode, and as most of you know, I did start college in the fall, and I did drop off the face of the earth, not only on podcasting, but also on social media. I have resurfaced now in winter break. I came back, and we are going to start off strong this new year with a new episode talking all about how to be a thriving student, which honestly, I feel like should be talked about more because we live in a world full of distractions. We live in a world full of misinformation when it comes to what we should be aiming for as a student. And honestly, no one really tells us what exactly we're doing when we show up for the first day of kindergarten. What journey are we starting out for, and what is our aim for that journey? So we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit. And by no means do I claim to have all the answers when it comes to these things. The real purpose of this podcast is to talk about things I've learned and I wish I would have known sooner, and also just to start the conversation. This is a conversation you can have with your family, with your friends, because we're all students and we all have to work through this together. So I think it's important that we talk about it more. But that's the topic of this episode, and this is kind of the first official episode of the Fearlessly Different podcast, because last time we had an episode, if you remember, we were rebranding from How to Homeschool in High School, so this is kind of a big deal. So without further ado, let's just dive into it. It was Thanksgiving break when I really started to think about this, because before then, up till then, we started college in the end of August. Till Thanksgiving break, it was nonstop school. Yeah, it was crazy. And I was prepared for this. I know I've talked a lot about dual enrollment. And as a homeschooler, obviously this was a great increase of workload in in a very short time period as what I was used to. But as I've mentioned before, as homeschoolers, I do believe we are very adaptable. So I do not tell this to scare anyone who is currently homeschooling through high school. Like, am I going to be able to do this? Yes, because everyone else that I was around was struggling with the same thing. And majority of the people I was around were public schoolers. So we're all in this together. This is a new learning experience for all of us. So don't get freaked out when it comes to college and the increase of pace and volume of workload. You will be able to handle it with some grace period for yourself. So, all of this to say, I was extremely busy from the months of August to November, and when we had our first week-long break, I finally had nothing to do, really. I mean, I had some things to do, but not really. Thank goodness. My professors were really nice, and they were like, take your break. So, during this break, I was stuck with the person I was becoming. Because, when you get really busy, you don't really notice that slowly you're changing and the people that you're around are changing you. And that kind of scared me a little bit, because I was confronted with a person who was very focused on the wrong things, if you know what I mean. So I had been working really hard and trying to get a good first semester grades, and focused on what my professors wanted, focused on getting my homework done in a timely manner. And all those things I think are good in perspective, but I had completely lost my rhythm of being in the Word and my rhythm of intentionally seeking out my friends and being in community. And I was so consumed with my work as a student that I was neglecting who I was becoming. And so when I was stuck with that week between, week of Thanksgiving break, I was stuck with myself, and I came to this really shocking realization that I hadn't opened the Bible probably like more than twice in the past like 2 weeks. And to me, coming from homeschooling, when that was the first thing I did, no matter when I started school, I always did my Bible, because I knew that I could fit everything else around it. And that was a little bit of an assurance. But when it came to the college and the very time structured schedule, I felt like I couldn't squeeze it in and still have time for everything else. So anyway, I noticed that I wasn't reading the Bible very much, and I also noticed that I was allowing fear to control my life. And it wasn't, and that's not a new realization. I think I knew this before because as a high school student, I had that same pressure that I felt now. It's pretty much no different. It might be a little bit more intense, but no different. And I would allow fear to control me just because I thought, well, if I'm afraid of failing, then that will make me study. That makes a lot of sense, right? I don't know. It made sense to me. If I was afraid of failing, then I would study and I wouldn't get distracted and I'd do all my work on time because fear of looking bad in front of my professors and getting a bad grade and just being disappointed in myself, and that all sounded terrible to me. So I allowed that fear to drive me forward, and I thought that made most sense. So whenever I would hear people say in at church, especially, like we're not supposed to be governed by fear. We're not supposed to allow superficial things like grades, for example, to rule our identities. And as a Christian, I obviously said, yes, yes, of course, that makes sense. I believe that to be true. But I was living out a completely different reality. And during that break, I was confronted with that. I was confronted with the fact that I believed in my heart and my mind that as a Christian, my identity comes solely from God. And as a Christian, I should not be allowing fear to drive my life. But every time I would come across that, or someone would say that to me, or I would hear that somewhere, I would not associate it with academic things. I would associate it with, oh, I'm afraid of sharing my faith, or I'm afraid of reaching out to that person, or I'm afraid of doing this hard thing. Not school. Like I wasn't afraid of failing. That never came into my mind because I associated that fear with success. And that's kind of terrifying because I realized that I convinced myself that the only way to succeed academically was just to allow fear to run me, so therefore I wouldn't mess up, I wouldn't slip because the fear of failure is too big, and the bigger I allow the fear of failure to grow in my life, the more academically structured I'll be, the more academic I'll become, and the more studying I will do, and the better I will become a better student if I allow my fear of failure to grow. See, saying it out loud makes it seem a lot more terrible than I had allowed myself to believe it was. Because I really wasn't thinking about it. That didn't really become obvious until I was so burnt out and I was so tired and I was so terrified I became paralyzed. And I was very easily distracted and I really wasn't getting my work done. And so my plan was backfiring on itself and I was just exhausted. I came to Thanksgiving break and I felt like I had been running and sprinting, and then all of a sudden they were like, stop. You could stop for a little bit and then you have to start again. And the idea of starting again was terrifying to me. So by the grace of God and through his word, I began to realize what I was doing. And then I was left with one very big question, is if fear does not drive me, then what does? Because the reason I hadn't stopped fear from controlling me was because I felt like what else would control me? What else would drive me forward? You know, the idea that somehow love would drive me forward just sounded too abstract and confusing. The idea of fear was more easy for me to understand. Like, how could the love and security I feel in the word push me to study more? Because then what is my aim? And that is the whole point of this episode, is what is the aim of a student? What should our aim be? No one really tells us this, so we tend to fill in the gaps on our own. And I mean, no matter how you're doing school, this could be homeschooling, this could be online schooling, this could be public school. What is your aim as a student? We all have an aim. And I think a lot of our educators have that aim in mind when we don't understand. So this is primarily and should be the question every educator should have in their brains whenever they start school or start a class, is what is the aim of this class? Where do I want to point my students towards? But as students, we should actively be aware of where our educators and where our schools are pointing us towards, because education always has an aim. It's not done without one. We are human beings. We are put on a path. And I think this idea that education is not primarily a tool for information, but a tool for formation. We are becoming a person. You ever notice the people you surround yourself with the most are the people that you most likely become? And if you think about what school is actually doing, school is teaching you, should be teaching you how to think, and how you think will govern how you act, and how you act will govern your life, and your life is your life. So therefore, whenever you're being educated, you're being put on a path for your life. So yes, this is our educator's job, but is also as a student, especially as a high school student, especially as a college student, we must be aware of these things. So that begs the question, what is our aim? And for most of my life, I aimed myself towards perfection. I aimed myself towards grades. How many numbers and letters and high numbers can I get? How impressive can I be as a student? When colleges are going to be comparing me to everyone else, how impressive can I look? When employers are going to be looking at me and comparing me to other people, how impressive can I look? So I just aimed myself towards that goal. And that is a very, very quick way to burn out, very quick way to become depressed and anxious chronically, and become someone that I didn't want to be. So that was what I was confronted with at Thanksgiving break. I was confronted with this person set on this specific path because I had aimed myself towards it. And then I was confronted with the option of another direction, another opportunity for us. If we allowed ourselves to be driven by love and solidly grounded in the truth of our identity, what does that look like? As a student, what does that look like? And I had this crazy thought. I thought, well, is it strong enough? Like, fear for me was so strong of a driver, but yet so easily paralyzing me. I thought, well, is love a strong enough drive towards actually working hard and doing things and pushing myself? And I realized, what is the hardest thing that has ever been done? In my opinion, it is Christ going to the cross. And then I asked myself, what made him go? It was not fear. Well, it was a reverence to God, yes. A fear of God is different from the spirit of fear. It was not the spirit of fear, it was the spirit of love. It was love that drove him to that end, to do the hardest thing that has ever been done. So obviously love would be strong enough to keep me going at school. Like, that's not even a question. So the next question I have is, what practically does that look like to be a student driven by love and not a fear? A student driven by a solid identity instead of one chasing after grades. What would that look like practically? Would I still succeed? And the answer to that question for me is yes. But what does success mean? That's the other question we must ask ourselves, because no longer to me, success was solely about what letter grade I received from a teacher who had their own opinions and had their own philosophy of life. That's such a fickle thing to place your identity in. You're going to either be really high or really low a lot of the times, and that roller coaster of emotion I was allowing myself to go through was not making me a better student, even though I had tricked myself to thinking it was making me a better student. So where does our success lie now? And I love, well, here's a different story I have to tell. So one day, I think it was last year, and I happened to have I love watching ice skating. I don't know if any of you guys are ice skating fans, but I'm a dancer, so I love choreography. And something about choreography on the ice and just the way the ice skaters move it's just beautiful to watch. So I had it on doing school because as a homeschooler, you can. So I was watching this person do their routine, thinking, and they were like my age. So obviously I'm comparing myself to them because that just happens sometimes. And I'm thinking, wow, that's so cool. They have developed such a sense of mastery. I mean, how cool would it be to wake up every day and to get on the ice and pursue that level of mastery, just in your craft, to reach for that? And it hit me. I was like, oh wait, I have that same opportunity every day to get up and pursue a level of mastery in my subject. Because why? Well, because I've been given the opportunity to, because I have the brain and the resources to be able to pursue that. And why wouldn't I try? Why wouldn't I try? And I know that can seem a little cheesy, and to me, like in ninth grade, I probably would have been like, well, so what? Mastery, so what? But there's something beautiful about being able to master a subject and able to really, really digest and understand what's going on, and discovering part of the world is just, it's fulfilling in some part of me I didn't even know I had. And from that point on, I began to shift my thinking away from perfection to mastery, because those two things have a different way of achieving, and those two things have a different perception of failure. For perfection, failure is awful. It's the worst thing that could happen to you. On your road to mastery, on the other hand, failure is probably the best thing that can happen to you, because it teaches you how to succeed. So whenever I approached this new way of thinking about school from a different approach, rejecting fear and accepting truth, I saw my pursuit of mastery in my subject as something different than the pursuit of a grade. Because a grade can only tell you so much. It tells you how you studied for that specific exam. It tells you how that teacher decided to pull on a subject that you forgot you even studied, and no one in the class remembered, and so therefore everyone did poorly. Like, they're so fickle. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard. That's kind of the opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you should work hard. But when you confront roadblocks, and when you have setbacks, and when you don't get it perfectly, and when you don't understand right away, that's not a bad thing. That's part of being human, number one. And secondly, this road to mastery is not one that can happen in a second. It is one that requires dedication and endurance and perseverance. And the more things I hit against, the more roadblocks I encountered, the better off I'm going to be. So, myself going back into school after Thanksgiving break with this new idea, with this new kind of revelation in my head, what if I started rejecting fear? What if I just didn't allow fear to take root in my brain? Because obviously the thoughts are going to come, the feelings are going to come, and what am I going to do about them when they do come? So I just started fighting them with truth and just literally rejecting them. I never knew I could do that. You know, when I started to feel panicked or afraid, I was just like, no, I'm not going to do it. And you have the power to do that, first of all, which I was quite an experience discovering in and of itself. And what happened, though, after that was more exciting to me, because I started to realize I had way more stamina for working than I ever had before. And I had way more excitement for what I was studying than I ever had before. I was not paralyzed any longer. And this confidence, and not a cocky confidence, not one that, and also not one that would be destroyed utterly if I was faced with failure. It was this constant security that I felt in myself, where if I somehow failed in this, my identity would not go away. God's plan for my life wouldn't be destroyed, and I wouldn't be destroyed as a student, because this is part of the process. So my complete perspective on school changed and shifted, and I became way more excited about the work I was doing, way less afraid, and more willing to put in work than I ever had before. So I just love that, because my whole academic career, I've relied on fear to drive me and fear to push me forward. And here's this one thought, this one surrender to Christ to give him that, and immediately I'm way more productive than I ever have been on my own. That's exactly what and I was just sitting there thinking, why don't I just do what he says all the time? My life would be so much better. And, part of the reason why I feel like when I am confronted with my own failure, it is a good thing, is because I can't look on my life and think, I've got this. That's the worst thing I could possibly say. So if my life reflects some it calls on me an attitude of, I could never do this on my own, then that's good, because it continuously reminds me I need to be under his strength and not my own. So, and also another thing I realized is this is a daily thing. You have to surrender your fear daily, because it comes daily. And that's why he said his mercy is new every morning, is he wants us to come to him every day for strength to continue. So what am I trying to say through all this? What I'm trying to say through all of this is fear will not make you a better student. Fear will not make you a better student. That is worth repeating. That is worth writing on your wall if you have to, because it is a truth that I didn't want to accept. Well, when I did, it changed my entire life. It changed my entire semester. I finished off stronger than I ever thought possible. Fear will not make you a better student. And I feel like as Christians who, as Christian educators, as Christian students, we need to fight this fear. It's not helping us, it's hurting us. And if society is going to look at us as examples of what it means to be a follower of Christ, we don't want to look like everyone else. We don't want to approach school like everyone else. And I'm tempted, even as a homeschooler who was comparing herself constantly to the education system I've seen in television and books and movies, the public education system, I saw a lot of fear there. So I just copied what everyone else was doing because I thought, well, this is the way to success. It's not. Our idea of success is different. Our aim as students should be different, and we are chasing a better understanding of Christ through his creation. Everything we study reflects back to him. If you find him there, it's impossible not to find him. It's impossible not to find him in history. It's impossible not to find him in math. It's impossible not to find him in science. The more you look, the more you see his glory. So as Christian students, our aim is different. We are not headed towards perfection because that is not something we can ever achieve. We are headed towards doing everything we can as though we're doing it for the Lord, and doing it by rejecting fear and by rejecting perfectionism as an idol. And the repercussions from that are incredible, and they are so wonderful. I mean, shouldn't we enjoy the studies? Shouldn't we enjoy studying? I feel like that's something we should enjoy. And if the world can look at us, a burnt out world from chasing after these things that never satisfy, can look at us and see us doing well and having peace, how bright would that light shine? I think very bright. I believe very bright. And we can claim that as Christians, that peace is ours. I felt guilty having that peace. For some strange reason, I was feeling more happy and more peaceful than ever, and I felt this guilt, like, shouldn't I be stressed about this? No, you don't have to be stressed about this. That's the brilliance. That's the brilliance of this word, is we don't have to be anxious for anything. That's a call from the Bible. Do not be anxious about anything. So we can claim this peace over our academics, and we can work hard. I feel like as Christians, we should be the hardest workers of everyone, because we have this security and we have this identity already given to us. He gave everything so we could have it. So why shouldn't we work harder than everyone else and be the most peaceful of everyone else? And this is a high goal I feel like we should push each other towards and build each other towards, because we're not going to hit it perfectly. I wasn't hitting it perfectly, but I was taking steps in that direction, and you'd be surprised at how much I already saw an improvement in my life and my improvement with my walk with God. So this is a challenge for us as we enter the new year, to reject fear. Fear will not make you a better student. Leaning on the strength of Christ. When I look up to the mountains, where does my help come from? My help comes from God alone, the maker of heaven and earth and the mountains. We have him behind us. Why would we look towards anything else? Why would we look towards ourselves? We know most of all that we are the weakest and we are the least qualified people. So why do we continuously look for strength within us when we have him to rely on, the strength of everything? The God of all. The God of the thing we are studying. He can reveal to us the understanding we need in order to succeed. If we surrender this experience to him, I believe he is going to do mighty things through us. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. I hope it was encouraging to you. And like I said, I just want to start the conversation towards something different as homeschoolers, as students who have decided to surrender our education not unto the government but unto Christ, and our parents know a thing or two about this. It's a daily thing. It is a trust exercise for sure. And as we do this, I feel like our aim for us as students should be different. We should be pointed towards something different, and that requires us to have a different sort of strength behind it. And fear does not own us. Fear is a liar. It is not going to make us a better student, and I think it's time we reject that and put that away from us and focus on our lives on him. So like I said, I wanted to start this conversation. If you have any suggestions or revelations of your own, I would love to hear them. My email, as always, is linked in the show notes. And that's it. I think that's all I have for you guys today. For the rest of the week, I do have an episode coming out later this week that I did with a wonderful theater curriculum. Actually, my family just started a theater club in our homeschooling community, and that has been wonderfully beneficial, and it's really changed a lot. And I wanted to start talking about that here as well. Like I said, we're going to continue with homeschooling content, even though I'm kind of we shifted the podcast name and the brand is, but our mission is still the same. So I'm excited for you guys to hear that interview. Thank you all for listening, and as always, continue to be fearlessly different.